Hello, my name is Chris Blask, and once again, I am your host for another episode of The Inevitability Curve. In each episode, we take a particular topic and look back with an interesting guest on where we've been in this topic, where we are today, and where we're going in the future, perhaps. Our guest today is Stuart Phillips, and Stuart and I have worked together for many years in cybersecurity. Hey, Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chris. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. So it's looking very Pacific Northwest behind you.
Thank you. I live in Lake Stevens, which is a little north of Seattle, and today we're having a great fall day. It's raining and cloudy, you know.
As one does.
You know.
So you and I have worked together in cybersecurity for many years, right? And since 1998, when I joined Cisco, and in all of those contexts, and for both of us before that, there's contact with military organizations and helping them with security and helping private sector organizations with security. And, this issue of conflict, of human conflict, and how the lessons of all of human conflict apply today, whether today is the late 90s or the 2020s, is a constant topic. Right. And you're, quite a military history buff and history buff in general, as I am. So let's talk back there a little bit. Right. In more recent history, without going back to Assyria this time, 100 years ago, 80 years ago in World War II, most folks, certainly everybody in the cybersecurity world knows about Bletchley Park, right? And the information warfare, that both the hacking of access codes, so they read the messages,
right,
and the manipulation of physical artifacts and people and things to give a wrong impression, seeding the wrong information. Where would you like to start in the past in mapping into where we are today with information warfare and conflict in general?
Well, I mean, you bring up a really good point about, the Enigma efforts and all the things, and a lot of it, where there was a combination of human error and technology, right? And so what happens is you have German operators who are sending every message with the same couple words. And I will not repeat on this, call. And also the fact that they were able to create the bomb, the ability to create a, very early computer that was able to decode it by trying thousands or hundreds of thousands of combinations, even though they did have a really good guess. But the advantage of the human error was that they had a place to start. And it's interesting because even today, you have a combination of human error, which is people clicking on email links, people accepting invitations from people who are not the person they think they are. And then you also have technology where now you have like the deep fake technology where someone can sound like your boss, or someone can sound, present themselves very realistically, or what we're seeing at Reversing Labs, where people are creating an individual malware package just for a single target. So instead of 10, 20, 30 years ago, they would create malware and then email it to everybody in the world. Now they're actually using AI to create a single crafted malware package just for Chris Blask, and so you may be the only person to see it. And a lot of tools are the traditional tools that were like, have you seen this before? Is this in your antivirus type things like that? Those tools don't really work anymore. And so we're seeing a lot of, changes in how these, types of attacks. But the other thing that's been really interesting to me lately, of course, has been the conflict in the Middle East, and also the Ukraine, where we're looking at, how drones and thermal sites and people riding an e-bike in the woods and coming up on a tank and being able to take it out with a handheld missile. And, the tank costs several $1 million, and that whole setup for that person costs $2,000. And so you see a huge distinction between these types of traditional military, belief that, having tanks, having big planes, having big missiles and all this kind of stuff makes you invincible. And somebody coming along with a, $600 commercial drone and dropping a hand grenade on into the cockpit of your $35 million airplane is devastating.
And but again, how much of that is some of that sounds similar to me? You know, the World War II, the tanks and the forgetting the German word for the little
The Panzerfaust. Yeah.
Panzerfaust. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, so knowing where those are at the right time, you know, having the intelligence and
Right.
information to get your asymmetrical advantage out of it is itself not a new thing.
No, not at all. I mean, all of these types of technologies, these advantages, we've seen them, move forward. And that the challenge now is that how do you, as a defender, prepare for these things when quite literally the technology is changing quickly? You're seeing a lot of things happening that are unprecedented. I mean, Yemen, a place that you're familiar with, you have the Houthis shooting ballistic missiles. Um, again, when I was, during the Cold War, only 3 or 4 countries had ballistic missiles, right? And when India got ballistic missiles, it was a really big deal. Now, apparently, anybody with a tractor trailer can have a ballistic missile. So, it's not and again, it's this idea that you could shoot missiles at another country, and there's really, war doesn't break out like you think it's going to.
Well, and following that past thread and getting more into the cyber side of it, so we recorded a Tech Strong Gang episode this morning and got on the topics of mainframes, right? And for most of us in the IT world today, we're DevOps and DevSecOps. I mean, these are words and terms and phrases that we understand, and we think mainframe is like, hang on a second. But as we're talking about there's a lot to be learned from that. Mainframes were the mainframe platform, the mainframe environment. Was a very solid and stable and secure thing. And today, mainframes, you and I worked at Unisys, where mainframes continue to operate, the entire global financial backbone.
Yeah,
and they do that because they're doing things that in the broader IT world now we kind of think are impossible, but that's the way they were built all along.
Yeah, and again, there's this idea, the centralized system with terminals that really don't have any type of capability on their own. And you see that now, though, with virtual systems. You see that with systems that boot up. You have a laptop, but there really isn't anything there. You boot up an image that comes from somewhere else. The image runs on your PC while you're doing your work, and then when you shut it off, it's gone. Someone breaks into your house and steals your laptop. They don't have any of your secrets. So, I mean, that mainframe centralized terminals as dumb model is very heavily replicated today in a lot of this, systems that do these distributed, deployments. And, having everything in the cloud, which again is just a computer in another state, is not, to me, it's really no different than a mainframe, right? I mean, the way we dealt with mainframes, I think that the main difference now is that your ability to spin up these things is quite easy, right? Before, to get a mainframe, I would go, when I worked at network systems, we sold front end controllers and all that stuff, back in the early 80s. If you wanted to have your own mainframe, that was great, but it was going to be a 5-year effort and you needed a specialized building. Now you just need to go on, Microsoft Azure, and you have a credit card. You're good to go. You can have a complete operating data center within a few minutes.
Well, which plays right down my, my favorite, inevitability curve sort of thread. The same thing as you said about ballistic missiles. If you have a technology at some point, and it's very exclusive for whatever reasons, if it can be made less exclusive,
Right.
then eventually it will.
Right.
So you can think forward into that world and say, okay, by then we need to do what? And again, just in our relatively short working careers, we've seen a lot of this. Well, you can't ever do that because therefore you couldn't do X, Y, Z we're doing already, but we did it anyways.
Right.
And we find ourselves looping back to those same primaries, right?
Right.
That we need to be able to do these things. And
well, I think it comes back to exactly the same idea, right? That there's nothing new under the sun. I think that's in the Bible in the back somewhere.
Yeah.
Anyway, but no, that's the idea that there is not, these types of attacks are coming out. I mean, the type of, email fraud attacks are just very simple. People were doing that in the 1920s, right? They were just doing it with letters. They were doing it with, then they were doing it with telegrams, and now they do it with email. It's really not any different. The main difference is now you can, instead of sending 10 letters a day, you can send 1 million emails, and then you could have each one of them individually crafted by AI to target the person that you're going after. And again, human error is still the bane of cybersecurity, right? The people that will click on things because they're afraid of getting in trouble. And again, that's company culture, right? I mean, I get at Reversing Labs, we have we have all Slack, right? We use Slack for everything. And we have a Slack channel called Mario Needs Help. And Mario's our big boss, and he's, great guy. And he a lot of people know him and talk to him. He's very present, right? He's one of those CEOs who's always, you're always talking to him in meetings. He's always asking really relevant questions. But Mario needs help. Anybody who starts at Reversing Labs within a day or two will get a text message saying, "Hey, this is Mario. I need you to go down and buy $1,500 worth of Apple gift cards for this customer." We don't know who's doing it. We don't care that much because it's never worked. And the amount of effort to put into it to try and find out who it is, it's not like we're going to be able, like I always say, like, you can't really call the police in, these countries and say, "Hey, we'd like to bribe you to go arrest somebody," that kind of thing. So, these people operate in corrupt countries, and they have all this thing. But it's just a thing. And then the way we dealt with it is very straightforward. We made it really visible within the company. So it's part of our new hire training. It's very clean. But again, it's also incredibly helpful that everybody knows what Mario sounds like. Everybody's talked, a lot of people, almost everybody in the company has talked directly with Mario. So they kind of know what to do and what they don't. I've worked at companies where I didn't really actually know who the CEO was. And the idea that somehow they were wanting me to, do something. And we see that where people are just afraid of getting in trouble, and they're more afraid of somebody being mad at them for not paying a bill versus paying a fraudulent invoice.
And that plays to me. So we're talking about the present right now. So that plays to so many of my favorite buttons, right? And what you described to me sounds like a nice, practical, human trust-based solution, right? You hire decent people, you expose them to the information, the people, in this case, that they need to be able to respond to, and you put the technology underneath that to support that, but you're not basing it on, like you say, the fear of being fired for not doing something. So company culture, it's so the Department of Energy and the Cyber Informed Engineering Initiative, has a term that I just absolutely love, which is radical transparency, which lines up exactly what, I've been focusing on the last 5 years or so, the supply chain stuff, right? And you and I have talked this to death, and we're both working in companies that do that stuff these days. And it's just an exercise of the same things we talked about in 1998. Like, how do you get trust with the market if, in that case, you're a big faceless company called Cisco, by personally doing it and doing things and demonstrating the trust and being visible about it and being transparent. And right. And in the current conflict environment, right, so everything from misinformation, disinformation campaigns organized by nation states to influence demographics, and to your point, now supported by AI to sound just like Iran. What do you do? And I personally, I think the answer is the same as in cybersecurity and supply chain and open source. Be absolutely transparent. To the people you should be transparent to in the ways you should be transparent to them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that there's a lot of it has to be able to, organizations really need to be able to quickly respond to changes. And, you and I still deal with companies that say, I have a 5-year planning cycle, where, we're not going to be able to do anything for a couple of years. I know, a lot of the traditional industries have, planning cycles where they, it's like, yeah, I know this thing where drones fly over the, the electrical plant. That's really, really bad. But we really don't have, we can't really address that for 2 or 3 years because we don't have, Now that we don't have the money, we just don't, our methodology, our planning cycle, the Security Council only meets once a year, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of challenges within how companies respond and how are they able to react to these new types of attacks. But again, we're seeing, even in the last year or two with AI and how it's not, it's AI is not smarter or better than us. It's just able to do the same thing a million times over. So if I'm able to grab a list of email addresses, I'm then able to have a chat GTP program that's able to look everybody up on LinkedIn, figure out, what messages might be appealing to them, and then be able to send those emails. And I can do that in a day. I can get that done. I could be processing millions of them. And then again, one of the you look at traditional, like 1950s with the Russian spies, they would send a Russian who had been born in America but grown up in Russia, so he had an American passport. And there were very few of those people. And then they would come to the United States and they would be Russian spies, and they would do spy stuff. And they eventually would get caught, and then they would be traded for, our U-2 pilots and things like that. And now I don't really need to do that, right? I can bribe, or I can pay for influencers in a certain country, right? I can literally go online and find influencers who will spout whatever messaging I want to, give. They are local, right? They speak the local language. I don't have to worry about translation. I don't have to send my agents to that country and worry they'll be arrested at the airport because it's, a triple cross type situation, right? I mean, I can, countries now like Russia, they can just sit back, pay American influencers to spout their lies, and they don't have any risk, right? They're not sending anybody here. If those influencers get found out, they, may get arrested. They may get charged with tax fraud or some other types of crimes. But there's no risk to the Russians. There's no, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the people that are doing these types of espionage programs. The traditional risk where, this was going to cost millions, it was going to take, all these things. Russia really did have a village that was an American town, and they sent their agents there, and their agents had to speak English only, and they had to drive American cars, and they had to know what an air conditioner is, and all these types of things, because that was the only way to get them assimilated into these countries. And it cost millions and millions of dollars and took years and years. And, you'd have an agent that you've invested years and years and years of training in, and then he arrives at the airport and gets picked up because of a problem with his passport. And next thing you know, the whole thing's a failure. So I think, the way that espionage is being done now, the way that fraud is being committed, there's there's significantly less risk to the people who are doing it than the way it was in the 90s, right? In when we were dealing with criminal gangs, there was a point where in Russia you could call the Russian police and they would arrest people. That time is gone, right? And then, traditionally you had criminal gangs that were only interested in money, and and intelligence agents and government people. You and I used to do this. We used to laugh at the Chinese spies because they would work like 9 to 5, right? They would start working, they'd be in Beijing, they would start working at 9 o'clock locally, and they would quit around 5 o'clock, and they would take lunch. And so when we would look at the activities, we'd actually know, well, okay, based on where these people, the time that they take lunch, this is where we think they're based. Now, this is all done by, AI tools. It doesn't really matter, when it's done, or it's just being outsourced, and so you're going on, these, dark web mailing lists and, and chat boards and things like that, and just hiring people, and you don't really care where they are. And so a lot of this is, the challenge, and again, this is just the disappointing part, is things are getting worse, right? I mean, the risk of being attacked is 100%. And the ability for people to attack you has dropped dramatically, right? So instead of us needing an army and, $20 million to buy a tank and 7 months to train somebody how to drive the tank, you can buy an e-bike off of Temu for $400, and you know, a little handheld javelin missile, which, you know, has a half-hour training video that you watch on YouTube, and you know, you're good to go. So I mean, it's a dramatic, you know, dramatic difference in, you know, these types of attacks.
Well, and before we get into, you know, even the near term future, much less longer, slaughter bots. You know, you
Yeah,
remember that? 7-minute video put together by some concerned scientists. Oh, what's that been 5 years ago or so now,
something like
right?
that. Yeah,
Yeah, and the premise for anybody who hasn't Googled it already, you know, is that terrorists start using drones
hmm,
and social media identification information and so forth to individually target, you know, victims, you know,
right,
politically, or, you know, you're posting on Instagram a certain way, and a drone with an explosive
right.
is coming after you. And what you're describing is perhaps we're getting closer to, or maybe in that phase already, right?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You know, you think about like in Afghanistan, our opponents there used handheld radios. You know, commercial, you know, available ham radios, or, you know, the type of things you can buy uh, for $50, and they use those because they did not have location-based services, right? If you, you know, we have some incredible electronic warfare devices, the airplanes that, you know, fly around recording everybody's phone conversation, tracking everybody's phone, doing all that kind of stuff. That gives us an incredible view of the battlefield if somebody's using a phone. And so, you know, they shifted over to handheld radios. Same thing with pagers, right? You know, I took a police sciences course recently, and they were talking about if you catch somebody who has a flip phone, they are 100% a bad guy, right? Now, that's a generalization. Unfortunately, just turns out to be true. You know, unless it's somebody's great grandmother, you know, people who carry flip phones do not have location based services on them, and they're doing it so that it can't be tracked. So again, you look at it through two types of behaviors, right? One is, are you doing this for these reasons, or are you actually a criminal? It's interesting to me, though, that because most criminals are just stupid and do stupid things, and that's why they're criminals and they get caught.
Yes,
Most of the people I
thank
know
God,
who,
right?
most of the people who have carried flip phones, I mean, you go to the Black Hat or you go to RSA or some of these other shows, you'll see guys with flip phones because they're just convinced that the government is tracking them and they're really worried about it. And it's a really big deal to them. And you can't really, it's not a topic you want to bring up with them, right? You know, I never mention it because they'll just go into this long rant about how the government is listening to everybody. And it's like, well, they are, but they're not interested in you. You know, they're
Or you're
interested.
not that important.
Yeah, sorry. I mean, you know, unless
Well,
you're
and
selling drugs or being a terrorist, they're not as interested in you as you might think.
and you had mentioned, you know, pagers, because we had to go there in the current tense, because we're, you know, this summer, right? You know, just recently, you know, we all know everywhere in the world, you know, the supply chain attack against pagers and then
Mhm.
walkie-talkies, you know, in the Middle East, you know, presumably, you know,
Right,
affected by Israel, which makes perfect sense. And it's, and, you know, I mean, you know, this digital bill of materials thing, you know, that you and I
right,
have been talking about since 2019, right? You know, this is
right,
exactly the kind of use case I like running through. And, you know, 5 years ago, it was a bit, you know, you had to scratch your heads. You had to go to Scottish, you know, the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland to find folks who can really speak to the idea that I may need to know what software was running on the machine tool that made an individual part, like, say, a battery, you know, that's physically inside some device. I need to know that right now.
right.
Um, this is a demonstration that those, it's not just about software security, because I would, you know, you talk about you're sending
Right,
something into space. I may want to know who made the plastic case at a
right.
level of know that I would can use to put things in space, and we have to
Yes,
build those systems.
it is interesting because you know, we always talk about the insider threat, right? You know, if you are a criminal, right, and you are, your intention from the beginning was to commit criminal acts, you are the hardest person to deal with within the organization, right? You know, if you're an active criminal, sending you to the class where you learn about what emails to click on isn't really going to help the situation, right? Um, and so, you know, you see this idea that, you know, I can trust but verify, right? How do I know if someone has done this? I mean, at Reversing Labs, we have comprehensive supply chain security tools that will actually deconstruct a file. And the main reason being is I can't necessarily trust you. If I love you like a brother, you know that, right? But if it's my job, I can't say, hey, Chris, we're buying this phone from you. Can you send me a copy of the software uncompiled so we can examine it? Now, 99.999% of the time, that's fine, right? The challenge is, what if you don't send me the right software? Or you're a criminal and you intentionally send me the wrong software without the malware on it. And when I get the phones, they all have the malware on it. So I can't trust you. I love you, but I can't trust you. And so I have to, I do have to check it myself. I do have to deconstruct the software as it is, not as I want it to be, or, hey, send me your files and the link to, your Python repository, right? That doesn't really help. I need to see the actual software. So being able to take the software, deconstruct it with like our Assure tools and things like that, that allows you to have 100% confidence in this. And I think the thing that I don't understand, and again, I will just say this, and again, there's many things that you and I know that there are a lot of lies told by everybody in this industry, right? Vendors lie, customers lie, governments don't necessarily represent what happened for various reasons. And so, we hear the story, these pagers were made in Hungary, they were made, somebody set up a company, 15, all that stuff. And as you know, sometimes we're in the deal, right? And we go and watch TV and you go, that's not what happened, man. I was there. I was in Korea on that day when that attack happened, and that's not what happened. And it doesn't matter because that's the story, right? That's the story they're going to go with. So you have to deal with that. But I find it really hard that nobody, if you received a couple thousand pagers, no one took one apart and looked at it. I mean, and again, if that's true, that's an incredible level of incompetence. The idea that, hiding a piece of plastic explosive and some ball bearings inside a pager. I carried a pager for a long time, right? I was a field engineer and, to get pager pay, which I really miss, by the way. I knew which pager was mine by how much it weighed, and I think that, I think it's really hard to understand that what happened there with the idea that somehow these were bought, acquired, distributed in active use. And at no point over this period of time did one break and therefore somebody had to take it apart and look at it, or the battery died and somebody took it apart and went, wait a minute, why is there a little bit of plastic in here with some ball bearings? Well, I just don't understand that. And that's interesting but again, having gone through all of these types of things, we know that there's the story about what really happened and what didn't happen. It usually comes down to either laziness or corruption.
Yeah, right? I love that you mentioned that criminals are stupid, because I can't tell you how often I use that, because you have to understand, that the evil mastermind from Hollywood, who's got the big brain bigger than everybody else, and has for some reason invented teleportation, decided not to just get rich on that, doesn't exist. Right. Usually people making bad choices are making bad choices because thinking about everything properly. Right. And we can call that stupid if we want because it works, right?
Well, again, you have your two basic types of criminals, right? You have your typical career criminal who's very much used to going to jail, and you have your I have friends that are like parole officers and things like that. They say there's two types of criminals, right? The one that was never expecting to get caught and is scared to death of going to jail again. The person has a DUI or criminal DUI, or, did a little bit of time and now is just absolutely terrified and shows up early to their parole meeting, and all that kind of stuff. And you have your career gang member who's been in and out of jail since he was 11 and is just as uncomfortable in jail as they are at home, and doesn't really, would prefer not to be in jail, but the idea that, they're somehow not going to be a gang member is just crazy. They're gang members, their whole identity.
So so with all this, anyways, let's look out in the future, right? So I have an ongoing posit. I keep saying that, I can't see a medium term to distant future where some of these problems still exist, and not because morally or ethically we all love puppies or whatnot, because you just can't keep the lights running. We
Right.
need these systems to work at a high fidelity to the point that mainframes have been working for the last 50 years.
Mhm.
But a much more complicated, much more distributed environment
Right.
that requires and calls for the kinds of structures that, again, I think
Right.
folks like you and I have a good idea, right or wrong, exactly what they are. But once they're done, we'll be able to look at it and say, aha, that's how that works.
Right.
It makes all this stuff a lot harder everywhere from the nation state level. And just to see that, so David Brin, right, the science fiction author, was at
Mhm.
RSA in San Francisco this year, and in the
Right.
TechStrong
Right.
booth, got to
Right.
hang out with him for a bit. And in one of his favorite books of mine, Killing People, one of the basic premises is that crime and particularly complicated a
Mhm.
conspiracy is really, 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 really hard, to the point that it almost
Right.
doesn't happen anymore. And I think that is the direction we're going. How long it takes to get there is a big question.
Yeah. Again, I think that the challenge is going to be how quickly can these organizations adjust to these types of things. We're starting to see people now. We're dealing with customers who are saying, before I would only check one or two software packages that came into the company. Now I want to check everyone. And and again, if you and I were, I mean, honestly, you and I have been around doing this so long. I remember you and I going to like can't remember what bank it was, but the guy was like, "Why would we need a firewall? We're never going to connect to the internet. People like going to the bank." Who like a guy? I remember that guy was like, "Who let you in here? Like, why are we having this meeting? We're never going to, internet banking? Are you crazy? Banks are judged by how many branches they have. That's the most important thing. Even when ATMs and things were coming along, it still was the idea that somehow there was it was not going to be something that people really wanted, right? Why would you want to take money out after the banks close? That's crazy. You should have planned
Well,
ahead.
and to our topic right here,
Yeah.
I think I have these conversations all the time. Basically, anonymize it, but generalize it. But it's some executive saying, what do you mean? My employees can't make most of the decisions about their work responsibilities by what they generally pick up on the internet.
Right.
Because that's to your point about your boss, your CEO, and so forth, and that that process you have with employees. It generally works, right?
Yeah.
It's not very
No, it works.
scientific, but it generally works until it doesn't anymore. And
Yeah.
I think you have to, that you and I were down in Colombia, Medellin,
Right.
before the pandemic and
Don't
so
talk
forth.
about that. No, just kidding. Keep going.
As I said, the public information was
Public information. Yeah.
only ever shared on this
Why did
channel,
we go by canoe? That's what I don't understand.
right? I should have taken
No, go
Mark
ahead.
Twain. It's another topic,
Exactly.
but in that time, working with those folks, and that
Mhm.
national infrastructure and so forth, and looking out over periods of time,
Right.
that 25-year plan.
Right.
We're right at about 7 years in right now. And 7 and
Right.
15 years were those sort of break points where we said, by this point, you seriously need to be thinking about
Right.
these issues. And one is,
Right.
How do you really know when you're turning the power off and on?
Right.
There's got to be
Right.
systems of automation and transparency that don't exist yet, but will exist by then.
Right.
And they do. Right. And you look
Right.
out, that next, how much is 18 years on that roadmap.
Right.
And I think that generally we and the people involved in
Yeah.
that and similar efforts are right. To your point,
Well,
in 15 more years and 18 more years, we're going to be living in a slightly different world where
right.
we will have had to adopt certain parts of that transparency and clarity,
Right.
just so we can live in conflict environments.
Yeah. And I think it comes back to experience, right? I mean, I, like many, many people in the cybersecurity world, thought that Russia was going to be able to attack Ukraine and launch a massive cyber Pearl Harbor and wipe out everything and turn all the power off and turn off all communications. And it would just be completely dark and their phones wouldn't work and everything else like that. And it turned out none of that happened. And that turned out the Ukrainians, because they had been actually experiencing this for years, were very good about defending themselves, right? And I know a lot of people have been to Ukraine. I know some of our mutual friends have worked there and tell stories and stuff. But they have Ukraine was able to turn around their situation. And when these Russian attacks happen, and they happen every day, thousands of times a day, they were able to dramatically defend themselves quite well because they had experience, right? And that's the thing, that's the difference between a lot of these organizations. I think that they should be looking to guidance from people that are having these types of, incidents happening, and using them to predict what's going to happen in the future rather than what they did 10 years ago or what they did 20 years ago when they worked at the NSA, right? I mean, that's, and you look at, when we look at cybersecurity, some of the best cybersecurity setups are by people who run commercial Minecraft servers, right? Because you have your own private Minecraft server. You sell that to people who are really into Minecraft, who want to have their own, landscape or world or whatever you call it. And people in the industry will try and knock yours down. When we look at people who are very good at defending their infrastructure, you want to look at somebody who's getting attacked every day and doing well at defending themselves, right? If you look at the situation in the Middle East where you have hundreds of missiles being fired and hundreds of missiles being shot down, that's incredible, right? That is just science fiction, right? The idea that somebody could launch 100, all those, diagrams, the Iranians have so many missiles and, this is what you need to worry about. And then they fire most of them and it costs them billions of dollars to do that. And very few actually get through. And, and again, it's a terrible thing. It's a tragedy. It's absolutely the worst thing in the world. But if you were looking to defend yourself, you would look at something like that and say, okay, how did they do that? Right. And the same thing you want to look at, so you look at people who have high level competence, and at the same time have a high level of, direct experience in doing these types of things. So when you're reaching out to security organizations or looking into with different groups and things like that, you just want to be talking with somebody who's actually done it, right? Who's actually run a system and been under high attack and successfully defended themselves. Now, those people are rare and they're hard to acquire, but you should listen to them. They don't necessarily have to work for you, but you can listen to them. You can listen to people like yourself who have had this experience and have gone through, but you just have to open up and say, what are we trying to do? We're trying to defend our organization. We can't trust anybody. We need tools that can do this, and we need policies and procedures to effectively use those tools. Because even with the best tools, if you don't have the skills to use them or the ability to use them, that's where you get into the frustration. And everybody I know who's left cybersecurity, and I'm sure it's the same with you as well, has left because of their frustration with their organization, right? Hey, we had a meeting about this 6 months ago, and I told you this was going to happen. And, you told me to shut up and go back to work, or, we needed to work on our,
We don't have the budget.
We had to, we can't go back to our bosses and say we were wrong. We can't ask for a change in the budget because it'll make it look like we don't know what we're doing. And the reality is you should be almost fluid, like wake up today and say, what are we going to do? And the difference, again, you used to have criminal gangs who were trying to steal money, and that was really straightforward. And then you have government organizations. Now, before you had to steal money and print fake credit cards and hire people locally to go and, cash out crew and go into the local mall and buy TVs and jewelry and things like that. And then, you'd only work for like 20 hours maybe. And after that, the credit cards were no good. And you have to start over. And now you have, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Now that's very fluid and, harder to track and very, easy to do. And then you have a rise of North Korea, where they're actively stealing money, right? The biggest, heists, the crimes, the bank robberies that you want to say in history are done by employees of the, North Korean government, who probably wear a uniform to work. But at the same time, they're stealing millions of dollars because they're using it to fund their own country.
Right.
And
Not long ago, they were.
That is science fiction, right? That, 20, 30 years ago, that was, you read Neuromancer, right? The idea of Wintermute, and you had the idea of an AI that escaped and went and lived in Antarctica, and that was, and was, hiding from people. That was incredible. That's as real today as anything you want. You can spin up your own organization, hide it, have, have it running on servers in another country, never have any physical access to them. And the only time you get caught is when, you get tricked into, hey, Chris, you've won a free trip to Crete. You want to come to Cyprus? We will have a conference we'd love for you to come to. And when you land there, there's 2 FBI agents waiting for you. Right. That's the only way that you get caught now is by being tricked, and the cost of doing that, you could do that for $10,000. Right. And, there are countries in the world that don't have jet fighters, but have cyber warfare groups that are very effective. And then when you have a merging of that with corrupt government officials who are using this for disinformation, things that happen in some countries, it becomes even worse, right? You have, it becomes a situation where we see that in where, we have news people, journalists who get arrested by the government for telling the truth. And so now you see, news organizations actually having virtual journalists, right? It's an AI representation of a journalist reading a news story, because all of their, otherwise the government guys are going to come over and arrest you in the middle of the night at your house, and no one's going to see you again. That, again, is science fiction, but now it's just as real as can be. And the resources for that are not, I don't need a $100 million, plant and, several top scientists, PhD AI guys. I can go on AppSumo and, buy something for $90 and it'll do what I want to do. So it's just, again, it's just a different world.
It is, and we're living in it, and we're moving into yet another one. And I wish we had more time. We could do this stuff until the cows literally come home. So, thank you for your time today. Thanks for decades of being a good person, good friend, and everything you've done to help make the world a slightly better place.
Well, thank you. And again, thank you for being able to give me a platform to rant for a little bit, but and then being these types of ideas. But I think the main thing, again, is that while things are bad, you and I go to these security conferences, and it was always doom and gloom, right? End of the world. This is all terrible. And I'm like, no, the lights are on, right? The internet is working. There's, if things are so terrible, then why is everything just, as good as it is, right?
Global hunger is moving down.
Global poverty has been halved in our lifetime, right? You're talking about 1 billion people moved out of poverty. That's incredible. And again, it's done because of technology and because of people that really want to make a difference, but also because of, free markets and capitalism, being able to say, if we raise these people up, then maybe they'll buy, cars. So, let's do that. So again, it's this idea that, things are not that bad. I mean, you do have to be more flexible and be a little more fluid and things like that. But that's just because of the way things are, the technology is evolving, but the defenses are evolving just as quickly. And again, it's your ability to be able to use them. So get some good people around you and get some, get some good on training and get some transparency, get a couple good tools, learn how to use them and take advantage of them. And, everything will be reasonably good.
I agree. Well, thank you again. Thank you out in the world for spending some time with us today. And look forward to seeing you again on another episode.
Absolutely. You have a great day.
You too. Bye, folks.
Bye.